Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has issued a powerful warning to his nation's enemies while speaking from the country's atomic research center in the Negev. The premier said those who threaten to wipe us out put themselves in a similar danger and in any event will not achieve their goal. The statements are believed to have been largely directed at Iran, which has advocated Israel's destruction since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Meanwhile, there's increasing concern over reports from Western intelligence sources that Tehran has transferred short-range ballistic missiles to its Shiite proxies in Iraq. If verified, the weapon systems would be within striking distance of Tel Aviv. Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman declared that Israeli security forces will contend with any threats, no matter where they originate. The alleged missile deployment is apparently part of a new aggressive strategy by ruling ayatollahs in the hardline Islamic Republic. Aaron has more on that story.
Yes, that's right, Yochanan. The European Union has been scrambling to preserve the Obama-brokered 2015 nuclear pact, referred to by many as the worst deal in history. Washington's withdrawal from the accord and the reimposition of crippling sanctions has left the rogue Islamic Republic struggling with skyrocketing prices and unemployment levels. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani remains defiant, however. He delivered a fiery televised speech claiming that his nation is more unified than ever, and he vowed that the punitive American economic measures will be overcome. But the potential game-changing presence of Iranian missiles in Iraq would not only threaten Israel, but also Jordan, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, as well as American and European troops based in the region. The alleged deployment directly violates United Nations Security Council Resolution 2231, and it is reportedly spurring a behind-the-scenes European reassessment of continued relations with Tehran.
In other regional news, Syrian opposition leaders are reporting that a weapons depot at an air base in Damascus was targeted by Israel. The claim was supported by regional officials who said Syrian air defenses were activated in response to Israeli missile fire from across the Golan Heights frontier between the two countries. Syrian state media later backtracked on those earlier reports. Official newscasters read statements that the blast was simply the result of an explosion at a nearby ammunition dump that had been sparked by an electrical problem. Israel has previously acknowledged carrying out hundreds of airstrikes in the Arab Republic aimed at degrading the capacity of Iran and its allies. The targets include Lebanon's Shiite Hezbollah group, which has been fighting on behalf of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in the country's 7-year civil war. Nearly all of Iran's military infrastructure came under fierce attack this past May after hardline Islamic forces fired rockets at Israel for the first time in what was the most extensive military exchange between the two adversaries in history.
Washington has finally said enough and immediately ended all aid to the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, known as UNRWA. U.S. taxpayer dollars have been the organization's single biggest source since it was created 7 decades ago. The Trump administration made the move after branding UNRWA an irredeemingly flawed operation that was an unsustainable business model because it endlessly and exponentially expanded the community of so-called entitled beneficiaries. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed the funding cut and called it a positive step forward in the peace process. He added that UNRWA has not only been guilty of failing to absorb refugees, but it has also only perpetuated the conflict. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas called the holdback in American money a flagrant assault on his people. PLO Executive Committee member Hanan Ashrawi went even one step further and threatened that the U.S. and Israel will pay a price for the defunding.
Hundreds of Palestinians in the village of Ras Kakar hurled rocks and other objects at IDF troops who responded by firing tear gas and rubber bullets. The riots have recently become weekly occurrences following Friday Islamic prayers by Arabs who are opposed to the presence of any Jews living in the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria. Meanwhile, other clashes erupted when Palestinians attacked Israeli border police officers in the village of Al-Walajeh near Jerusalem. The residents became enraged when 4 illegally built houses were dismantled. And there was a separate incident in Hebron where a potential stabbing was thwarted. A terrorist pulled out a knife as he ran toward an army checkpoint into a Jewish neighborhood. IDF forces responded by shooting the attacker dead. There were no civilian casualties.
Israeli farmers have filed a war crimes complaint at the International Criminal Court in The Hague against top Hamas officials. Khalid Mashal, Saleh Harouri, and Zahar Jabarin are accused of ordering the daily barrage of fire terrorism that has torched thousands of acres of southern Israeli agricultural fields and residential property since March. They are also charged with transporting Palestinians to the Gaza border so they could launch thousands of kite bombs and other incendiary materials over the separation fence, while armed operatives used the smoke as cover in attempts to infiltrate and murder Israeli civilians. ICC prosecutors were also called on to investigate the firing of 250 missiles at Israeli civilian population centers. The complaint was co-signed by 50,000 other concerned individuals worldwide and drafted by the Shirat Hadin Israel Law Center.
There's been a call to action urging Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg to bar all Holocaust denial activity from his social media platform. The campaign was launched by the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany that negotiates and administers restitution of claims for victims of Nazi persecution and their heirs. The group released an open letter video to drive home the point that rejection of the truth is not something survivors should have to experience, and that Facebook should not serve as a forum for such horrific lies. So far, public response has been overwhelming. The video featured direct appeals from several Jewish victims of the Second World War and gave first-hand accounts of what they endured, what they lost, and how they still suffer from the atrocities of the Holocaust.
The end is nigh at Armageddon, well, at least for an old Israeli prison near the ancient ruins of Megiddo, which is considered to be the traditional site of the apocalyptic biblical battle between good and evil. The remains of a 3rd century Christian prayer hall were discovered during renovations of the maximum security facility back in 2005, although no further excavations were able to be carried out since then. But now the prison is set to be relocated, and archaeologists are expressing delight at being able to resume their exploration of early Christianity. The name Armageddon is believed to have evolved from the Hebrew words Har Megiddo, meaning Mount Megiddo. This was the site of numerous ancient battles because it overlooks the Jezreel Valley, across which armies have marched since antiquity toward a pass leading to the Mediterranean. The Roman 6th Legion garrison, thought to have been built by the Emperor Hadrian, was once based there. So far, walls dating back at least 7,000 years have been unearthed, as well as a stunning Christian mosaic.
The grandson of a notorious Palestinian terrorist is running for Congress in California. Ammar Kampa Najjar is the Democratic Party frontrunner in the state's 50th congressional district. The 29-year-old's grandfather was Muhammad Yusuf al-Najjar, who participated in the 1972 Munich Olympic massacre, in which 11 Israeli athletes and a German police officer were murdered. The grandfather, who also served as the head of the PLO's Fatah intelligence wing, was killed the following year during an Israeli commando raid in Lebanon. At some point, the candidate's father, Yasser, gained American citizenship. After living in the U.S., the family moved to Gaza and only returned to San Diego right before the 9/11 terror attacks. The young politician has been publicly endorsed by former President Barack Hussein Obama and controversial California Senator Kamala Harris.
The president of the Philippines thanked the Jewish state for providing what he called very substantial and critical assistance. Rodrigo Duterte made the statement during his recent historic summit in Jerusalem, when he became the first leader of his nation to visit since Israel's rebirth in 1948. Even though he held back on giving any details, Duterte did say that Israel's important contribution helped to preserve his republic. The 4-day trip was aimed at cementing relationships between the Asian power and the economically booming Jewish state. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressed gratitude for Manila's backing of Israeli independence 70 years ago, as well as for taking in Jews during the Holocaust. Duterte was accompanied by his daughter Sarah, born during his first marriage to Elizabeth Zimmerman, whose German Jewish father found refuge in the Philippines after fleeing Nazi Germany. The father and daughter paid their respects at the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial and laid a wreath in tribute to the 6 million Jews murdered during the Second World War.
Israeli ingenuity is now being dedicated to saving the lives of the nation's young combat soldiers. A pilot program is about to be inaugurated that will integrate male and female nurses with doctors and paramedics behind enemy lines. This way, physicians can concentrate on providing urgent care while support staff administer less time-sensitive triage. Doctors will be equipped with dry plasma that can be turned into blood for emergency transfusions by simply adding water. And combat soldiers will be issued and trained to use their own specialized tourniquets. Other new technology includes a smart sticker device that can be attached to patients and loaded with up-to-date prognoses. A new drone capable of delivering up to 110 pounds of medical supplies is also being tested as part of efforts to eliminate the exposure of supply troops to enemy fire on the front lines.
The High Holy Days begin Sunday evening when Jewish people around the world mark the start of the new year 5779. The occasion marks the beginning of the holy period known as the Days of Awe, leading up to the fast of Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the year. The central theme of the New Year celebration is the praising of God as King. It commemorates the anniversary of the creation of Adam and Eve and their first actions toward the realization of humanity's role in God's world. The holy day begins with a prayer for a good year and for God's blessing upon us. Customary traditions include the sounding of the shofar ram's horn 100 times during prayers, as well as the consumption of symbolic food such as apples dipped in honey to evoke a sweet new year.
We here at Israel Now News wish you and all of our viewers a wonderful year of health, happiness, and peace.
Shana Tova. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. We're here on a beautiful sunny day on our rooftop studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Ben Weiner. He's the managing partner at Jump Speed Ventures. Ben, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks a lot.
Tell our viewers a little bit about what is Jump Speed Ventures.
So Jump Speed Ventures is a early stage venture capital fund based here in Jerusalem, which is unique in that it invests exclusively in early stage software companies that originate in the Jerusalem area.
It's interesting that you invest only in Jerusalem-based companies. Most people, when they think of high-tech in Israel, think Tel Aviv. Why did you decide to go in the Jerusalem direction?
Yeah, so it's a classic supply-demand mismatch. You know, 45% of the country's population lives in and around the metro area of Tel Aviv, which is fine, and that's where the vast majority of investors and startups are going to find themselves. But Jerusalem has proven over the years that we can produce incredibly valuable and large startup companies that achieve very high value. And about 5 years ago, when the Jerusalem ecosystem began its renaissance, there were very few investors, really no investors, that had allowed themselves to focus on this ecosystem. So I jumped in, raised a little bit of capital, and created JumpSpeed to be the first and only venture capital fund to dedicate itself exclusively to the Jerusalem market.
The city of Jerusalem is taking a lead, I guess, because they're starting to invest a lot of money in building a high-tech center here in Jerusalem. Do you think in the future more people will move towards Jerusalem investment?
Well, you know, part of the fund's raison d'etre is to capitalize on what's already here, but I do definitely believe that the city's only going to get bigger and bigger in terms of its startup ecosystem. I'm very bullish on the future of Jerusalem, and the city, as you said, is doing a lot to build up the infrastructure around the startup ecosystem to make sure that it is sustainable and viable for the long-term future.
Another thing that's unique about your fund is that you actually do micro investments. We hear a lot about the $1 million investments, but you invest tens of thousands in stocks in companies. Why did you decide to go that route?
Well, the truth is I actually invest more. A startup company, even from the initial outset, usually needs a couple $100,000 to get started, so my fund can provide that initial funding for them. I'm able to make initial investments of anywhere from $100,000 to as much as $300,000-$400,000 to get a company started, and that's really what they need to get started, and they just don't have access to that kind of capital. You know, the joke was when we started JumpSpeed 5 years ago, I said to somebody, you know, we're in the capital of the startup nation and there's no capital. So we're now able to provide that early stage initial capital to get them started, to give them a year or a year and a half of budget to produce the early versions of what they're trying to produce. And thankfully, some of those companies have really gone on to tremendous heights and great accomplishments.
So this is a successful model. Can you give us some examples of some of the successes in the past?
Sure. one of my first investments in early 2014 was a small startup called Breezometer. This was basically two environmental engineers who had an idea for measuring air pollution and air quality. I invested the first $50,000 and then ultimately a couple $100,000 more in that company. And about a year later, that company was invited to the White House because they had been selected by the White House as, quote, the most promising startup company in the world for 2014. And that company, Breezometer, has gone on to great heights. They've now established themselves in 83 countries. They sell their data to Fortune 500 companies all over the world. And it all started in this tiny little office in Jerusalem. And we have a couple more like that in the portfolio that have gone on from tiny little ideas, really sketched on a napkin, 2 or 3 people, to companies of 30, 40, 50 people, raising many millions of dollars, selling their products or services for millions of dollars per year. And that's really just the beginning of where we believe that these companies will end up in the future.
We're known here as a startup nation. Why do you think there's so much innovation coming out of Israel?
Well, there's a lot of theories behind that. I think Israel's a melting pot, as you know, of many people with academic training and technology training from all over the world. So we have people like myself who have moved to Israel from, in my case, the United States. We have Russian technologists, scientists, really people from all over the world who bring their know-how. Plus you have the army, which is, the military is a tremendous producer of technology know-how. When you have a combination of sort of the Israeli chutzpah, the entrepreneurial spirit of the Israeli culture, with olim, or people that move to Israel from other countries, plus the products of the army, that's a magic combination that just produces tons and tons of innovation on an annual basis. It's been well documented that Israel produces per capita much more technology and startup activity than pretty much any other country in the world. And again, that's only going to continue for the future.
We're seeing every year billion-dollar exits now. Just last month, SodaStream sold for $3.2 billion. Is this something that we're going to see more of, or is this something that we're going to see less of? Because it seems like the trend is that bigger and bigger exits are happening.
Yeah, valuations are just going up in the market. So ironically, when people ask me, well, why would you dedicate yourself to Jerusalem when most of the activity is in Tel Aviv? I tell them, it's a little known fact that the largest 2, or really arguably 3 technology exits in Israeli history are from Jerusalem. So Jerusalem has produced the largest multi-billion-dollar exits in history. In 2002, a Jerusalem company called NDS was acquired by Cisco for $5 billion. And last year, 2017, Intel acquired another Jerusalem company called Mobileye for $15.3 billion. So Jerusalem has proven that we can, as a city, produce multi-billion-dollar startups. And it's my hope that within my fund and within our city, we can produce a number of those in the future as well.
We saw traditionally that the investment was coming from America, but now all of a sudden we're seeing a lot of investment from China. How does that change the parameter?
The word on the street is that as the Chinese have come in, valuations have gone up. Some investors have been spooked because Chinese have been, again, rumored to invest at higher valuations than other investors. I haven't necessarily seen that trickle into the Jerusalem market yet, but that is a concern down the line as new entrants come in that are sort of late entrants to the venture capital investing market. Sometimes they're less discerning and willing to pay higher prices for things, but we haven't seen that yet in Jerusalem. I'm not that afraid of that happening here.
Ben, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
My message is that, like I said before, the Startup Nation narrative is well known, but what a lot of people don't know is that the capital of the Startup Nation is Jerusalem, and there's still not enough capital in the capital. I'm doing the best that I can to bring more of that capital to Jerusalem, but I believe that globally, if you look at the world of venture capital, one of the most exciting markets in the world right now, because of its unique supply and demand characteristics, is the Jerusalem startup ecosystem. So I'm just very proud and privileged to be based in the middle of all that.
Thank you, Ben, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, wishing you a Shana Tova and Happy Jewish New Year. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Shalom and welcome to the Return to Zion with Keren Hayesod. I'm Greg Maisel, the Director General of Keren Hayesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. The story of the Exodus ship is one of Keren Hayesod's most famous rescue operations. Listen to the first-hand testimony of one of the brave women who fulfilled her biblical destiny by coming home to Israel.
As the dark clouds gathered over Europe, the door to the land of Israel was not yet open. Under Arab League pressure, the British ruthlessly restricted Jewish immigration. Keren Hayesod, alongside Jews already in the land of Israel, banded together and launched a clandestine naval operation, codenamed Aliyah Bet, to save their brethren from the clutches of Nazi Germany and bring them to Israel.
כשנגמרה המלחמה התחילו להתארגן יהודים לנסוע בחזרה לפולניה. ההורים שלי החליטו שהם רוצים להגיע לארץ. התחלנו לעבור את כל אירופה לכיוון מרסיי.
With careful organization and ingenuity, these brave souls defied the British authorities. Makeshift, rickety boats set sail from ports across Europe, transporting a wretched human cargo of men, women, and children desperately seeking refuge.
הגיע יום שאספו אותנו והתחלנו להתקדם. זה לקח אולי יום וחצי עד שאנחנו צעדנו בתוך מרסיי, וככה לאט לאט הגענו לאוניית האקסודוס.
Upon its arrival to the port of Haifa, the ship was deported back to Europe, thus making it a symbol of the many hardships Jews had to face during the time of Aliyah, immigrating to their historical homeland.
ראינו את אוניות הבריטים, המשחטות שלהם, מסביב כמו דגי טרף כל הזמן. כמו שאנחנו נסענו, הם נסעו. ואז הגיע היום, ראינו שהאוניות מתחילות להתקרב אלינו, וגם ראינו את חיפה, את האורות כבר. וכולם התחילו לשמוח מאוד שרואים אורות, אבל אני מבינה שהיו אנשים שהבינו שמתחיל קרב וזה. הם התחילו לשחק כדורגל, האנגלים עם האונייה. אחד נתן דחיפה ימינה, השני שמאלה, והאונייה התחילה להתפרק כמו לגו. בחיפה הורידו את האנשים, עשו עליהם פליט עם כל הכעס שהיה להם, והעבירו אותנו לאוניות, ל3 אוניות. זו הייתה אוניית אסירים, הם זרקו את כל התרמילים, אנשים נשארו כמו שעלו, בלי בגדים, בלי שום כלום.
Undeterred, the overcrowded, unseaworthy vessels of Aliyah Bet continued to challenge the blockade. Young Jewish fighters, aided by their non-Jewish sailors, succeeded in bringing more than 70,000 Jews home to the land of their forefathers in more than 100 vessels.
עם ישראל צריך להיות כולו בארץ ישראל. זה ראינו בכל הדורות.
Those who made it ashore were swiftly smuggled into the future Jewish state by daring activists from Keren Hayesod and elsewhere. Evading capture, the new arrivals were taken to kibbutzim and other new communities to live as free Jews in their own land, fulfilling the dreams of countless generations before them. And in doing so, they brought to life Zechariah's prophecy, not by might and not by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord.
זה המקום היחיד שאתה יודע שאתה בארץ שלך, על הקרקע שלך, כמו כל עם נורמלי אחר.
To this day, Keren Hayesod is helping Jews around the world come home with the help of Jews and non-Jews alike.
Join Keren Hayesod in celebrating Israel's 70th anniversary by donating only $70 a month to help fund Aliyah. Let's bless Israel together.
Now's the time for you to get involved. Assist Keren Hayesod to raise the necessary funds in order to bring Jews yearning for their homeland back to Israel. Your donation can help fulfill the biblical prophecy today. To donate and get information, call us at 1-800-505-1665 or visit our website at www.khisrael.org.
Early in my term as Israel's ambassador to the United States, I entered the office of a congressman from West Texas. Now, his district was probably several times larger than the state of Israel. He probably had few Jews in his constituency. But he had opened on his desk the Bible. And it was open to a chapter of Genesis in which God says, "Those who bless my people shall be blessed." The congressman pointed to that passage and he said to me, "I believe in that. How much aid does Israel need for its defense?" Now, I was taken aback by that at first, but I began to know and to deeply appreciate faith-based diplomacy, both in the United States and around the world. Not only in America, but now in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, indeed around the world. Christians are standing up for Israel. Christians are standing shoulder to shoulder with us in difficult forums such as the United Nations, in the media, and in many other areas where Israel is routinely condemned. Christians are there with us. They have motivated the United States to move its embassy to Jerusalem, our eternal and undivided capital, and have been instrumental in impelling Guatemala and now Paraguay to follow America's example. Faith-based diplomacy is founded on the belief that God does not lie. When God says in the Bible that he loves his people, the children of Israel, when God promises to restore Jews to their ancient homeland, to rescue the Jews from exile, these Christians know that God keeps his promises. God loves his people, Israel, and so too do Christians worldwide. During the hard times of wars, during times when buses were blowing up in Jerusalem, when no tourists came to this country, evangelical Christians never left us alone. They were always there, and they are there today. Christian Zionists today have become nothing less than a redundancy. To be Christian today is to be just that, a lover of Israel, a Zionist.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.